Would you like to learn how to study your players' minds, exploit their secret desires, and manipulate them into having a whole lot of fun? Some people think that you don't need a session 0, but if you're interested in running a story-forward, long-term campaign, one that your players feel connected to from the get-go, then running your session 0, like the evil mastermind you are, will make your players rave about your campaign for years to come. I'll be the first to admit that sometimes you can see the physical pain on a player's face when you tell them that you want to get them together, but that you're not ready to immediately start playing D&D.
No! God, please, no! No!
So for some DMs, they like to do just that. Get started with play and just flesh things out as they go. So I separate these two different styles of session 0s into what I refer to as the one-shot and the game plan. So I'm not necessarily saying that one is better than the other. The one-shot session 0 can be great. You get to immediately start rolling and playing with the story. But I think this style works best for either very broad campaign concepts, ones where the premise is more like, you are all a part of an adventurers guild, or for DMs and players that are more experienced, especially ones that have played together before and really can trust that each of them is going to come up with good storylines. But if you're watching this video, chances are that, like me, you're fairly new to DMing and you're not quite there yet. And that's why I'm going to recommend that you use the game plan style of session 0. Even though it's less flashy, this style of session 0 really helps your group get on the same page about the kind of stories they want to tell. This maximizes the chances that you'll be able to turn their ideas into a campaign that's complex, engaging, and really fun to play in. And that's because your players, they're gonna tell you exactly how to do it. Well, you can definitely say that a session 0 is about collaborating with your players to build their characters, their ties to each other, the world around them, and all that type of stuff. The true purpose of a session 0 is much more nefarious. More than anything else, the session is about giving you, the DM, the chance to do some sneaky, covert, big business style market research. Insidious. Truly. So if you did your pre-campaign survey, you actually have a solid chunk of this done already. Your players by now should have told you about their general interests, inspiration, the type of campaign they're interested in, and their availability. And at this point, you should not have a ton planned. You should not have detailed plot points. You absolutely should not have a coffee table tome of world building notes for your players to go through. Because at this point, you haven't gotten any meaningful player input. And without that, you're building a bunch of stuff your players might potentially not really care about. And you will have done a ton of work for nothing. Nothing. And you'll want to make sure you've avoided doing that kind of stuff, because today, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be asking the players about what they want, just in a more subtle, mastermindy kind of way. You might be going, Stephanie, I'm an adult. I can just ask them what they want. But guess what? You can't. So young, so trusting, so naive. Because it has absolutely nothing to do with being an adult. And it has everything to do with the fact that people don't always know what they want. Or sometimes they understand part of what they want, but not the drive behind it. The why they want it. And this is something that big businesses have figured out long ago. Have you ever been paid $100 to sit there for 2 hours and answer 500 questions about granola bars? Did they ever once ask you, what do you want in a granola bar? Nope. So if I were you, I'd take a moment to question if whether the executives at Coke and Apple are really just dumb baby idiots who can't just ask their customers what they want. Or maybe there might just be a better way to do this. So instead of asking our players what they want, what are we going to do instead? We're going to study the choices they make when they build their PC. Probe them for information about their choices. And see what kind of mini stories they build as they connect their PCs to the others. All of these choices are going to tell you what your players want, what sort of facets of storytelling they want to explore, and what feelings they're looking to kind of experience through their character. You'll get to see where their interests truly lie, which in turn will help you decide on what parts of your world and what storylines to build out. They'll be so enamored with their adventures, they won't even notice you pulling on their little puppet strings. So at this point, you might be feeling a little feisty, I feel like I can hear someone chirping about, what about the DM's fun, Stephanie? What about what the DM wants, Stephanie? DMs are players too, Stephanie. And yeah, of course your fun counts. Yes, you're a player too. And that's why you're gonna help guide your players with your
Handy dandy.
one page. Your single page campaign guide, a la Mike Shea of Sly Flourish, is going to be where you put your non-negotiables for your campaign. But because this looks like a fun document, it's a little more sneaky. In one of my next videos, I'm going to go over this one-page concept in more depth and talk more about creating a campaign portal for your players. That way they can see all of their fun choices and everything. But your one page, keep it short. There's a reason they're so short. Your players most likely will not read one page, if they read one page in the first place, because sometimes they don't even do that, honestly. But that's why we keep it short enough for them to panic read at the start of our session 0. And you don't have to single anybody out. You can just give them 5 minutes to reread at the start of your session 0 while you finish setting up. You don't have to be a jerk about it. So keep this short because it's very important. I'm gonna keep hammering this home. Your players, they don't care about this yet. But if you do this stuff correctly, they will, I promise. But right now, tomes of information will only A, bore them, or B, freak them out a little. This is where you'll want to say what your general campaign storyline is. So keep all of this very high level. Choose a simple goal you're interested, like protecting the town, questing for an item, something super basic. It's also where you'll talk about kind of the genre tome theme of the campaign. So if you want to play something with lots of horror and survival elements, you'll want to mention it here. And you'll want to gently guide them by letting them know what kind of characters would have the most fun in this setting. So again, keeping this very high level. And make sure to let them know that they shouldn't come with a fully built PC and their whole page yet. This is just high level ideas time. Tell them they'll have fun playing something like a protective father, a nervous academic. Just give them a few examples that would really fit in your campaign setting just to help give them inspiration. And the Fate RPG system actually has a really good write-up on this. It's for their character creation, but I like to give it to my players just to help show them what this might look like for them. So I'll link to that in the description, but also give them kind of basic group integration guidelines to follow. And so what I mean by this is give them their shared group goal to kind of coalesce around. And you want this to be something that's tied to the setting and the general themes you kind of want to explore. So are they all citizens of this town they're helping to protect? Are they all members of this adventurers guild? Are they all benefactors of this guy who they've done jobs for? Just something small and easy to kind of grasp onto. That way they can have these diverse characters, but they know one of their big goals already. But those are the major things you'll want to outline. So you'll be able to give them the basic story you're looking to tell, the theme and tone of the setting, and their character creation basics. Now, it's their turn. Now your PCs get to tell you what they want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. They want to spice up your life. So right now it's time to flesh out some PC ideas before the mechanical stuff really kicks in. That way you can help them pair their ideas with their mechanical choices. Because you can only really do this once you know what they're interested in doing during play. Like I said, I asked players to come with a handful of loose, high character concepts. That's because if they come with just one character idea they're really committed to, this process can start feeling like you're trying to push a bunch of square pegs through a round hole because they created these characters in a vacuum. So I'll have them go in a circle and just talk for 1 or 2 minutes about their high character concept. If they listened and really did come with a handful of ideas, you'll start to see something really cool happen because you'll start to see them tinker and adjust and maybe even swap out their ideas entirely. And this is awesome because instead of needing to strong arm them, they're starting to create a group of PCs that'll have a lot more cohesion all on their own. And one of the things that really helps with doing this is using a more defined session 0 system, which is totally fine if your group's having a ball with it. Some people just need a little more guidance, and that's okay. But if they need a little more help coming up with ideas and could use some extra guidance, I highly recommend the Session 0 system by Gabe Hicks and Elise Resendez of Mythic Grove Productions. They have a really great system of helping players create characters with rich pasts, strong bonds, and different catalysts to adventure.
Adventure.
Ones that give them their own interesting stories to tell within the broader campaign. I've used it a handful of times now and I've really been enjoying it. I feel like it helps characters kind of push the boundaries of story ideas they're thinking about. But if you just want something quick, another great way to help players if they're struggling with story ideas and connections to each other is to do something similar to what the game Fiasco does. So you'll give them some tables to roll on for their connections. I've posted an example link in the description, and they might actually even just read them off and see ones that they like the idea of. Ooh, a shared curse? Sibling rivalry. And they might just start spitballing about what that looks like. And if you do this one, I highly recommend you consider making a personalized table to do this with. Fiasco is a game meant to add in disaster, if you can't tell it by the title. And most of us don't want our campaigns to end in disaster, and we're rooting for our players to get stuff done. So, just a thought. And because we're evil masterminds now, creating your own roll tables, this is yet another highly sneaky way to kind of guide your players towards storylines you'd be more interested in exploring with them. Because if you love sibling rivalries, you can make that look like the more interesting connection to have. Sneaky, sneaky. But while all of this is happening, right now, this is the perfect time for you to put your listening ears on. Because I guess I'm a 3rd grade teacher now. See what themes are popping up for your players. Are there any ideas they get the most excited about? Their ideas are going to be the ones carrying that overarching plot. And if you lean into the things they're excited about exploring, you might actually get them to the end of their story. For example, I just did the session 0 for my first Underdark themed campaign that's heavily inspired by Atlantis the Lost Empire, but my high-level campaign storyline is about a quest for an item. But after that part, I had thought that this was going to be a campaign that's more about political intrigue and NPC interactions. Guess what? It's not. But that's the image I had in my head. But during the session 0, it became very obvious that based on the PCs that my players were building, it'll actually involve a lot more heist and exploration themes than anything else. By creating these characters with stories oriented around these topics, my players literally told me what they think is cool. They told me what they want to see. They are screaming it at me. Screaming. And notice, I didn't say it won't have any of the original things that I thought it would have. I thought it would have that because I love doing those things. So there will still be story hooks associated with those. But now I'm also gonna know that I shouldn't be offended if my players don't pick up on those ones. But this is why it's really important that you stay open during this process. It's because you'll be able to create a game that's a lot more fun for your group as a whole. And that's really hard to do if you're just married to your one idea and how you think things should go. And once we get all of this taken care of, then we can go forth and build out the mechanical choices like class, background, and so on. That way, all of their mechanical choices can support their story, and we can help kind of iron out any kinks with choices they want to make. So if you're extra sneaky, the days following the session 0 are the perfect time to follow up with your players. I personally like to get back in there and really flesh out some of their ideas, but I also try to make this as easy as possible. I usually just send them out little questionnaires, and I'll post an example of a completed one of my players made in the description. But this way I can get a little bit more out of their story once they've had the chance to think about it. This gives me the chance to mine their ideas for NPCs, places that might exist in the world, and items they might think are super cool. One player might have mentioned a mentor, so I'll follow up by asking them about the mentor. Are they still alive? What are they like? Can I turn them into an NPC around town or someone who might exist in a future location, and so on. Another player might have mentioned a tavern that their pugilist trained at. What's it like? Do they have a favorite bartender there? Or does someone there maybe owe them a favor? And so you can kind of see this line of questioning and where it goes. But it's just one more chance to really mine their ideas and then to build things out in the world that make it feel a little bit more real to them. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Some pitfalls to watch out for when you run your session 0. I'm just out here making all the mistakes so you don't have to. And generous like that. So pitfall number 1, don't include things things you don't want in the story. Again, I like to build out a campaign player portal. That way players can see what kind of choices they can make about classes, subclasses, backgrounds, races, heritages, and so on. And I like to present them with a bunch of options instead of just saying something like, no Aarakocra, because saying no blank really draws some people to the one choice you don't want to include. Especially if you don't really have a good reason. I feel like a lot of DMs are like, I just don't like this. Just let them have fun. But if you have real reasons, saying no blank is a lot more combative than saying, here are 30 options for you to choose from. So I usually go with the latter style of doing things. And I also tell them to shoot me a message if there's something they're interested in that they don't see in this portal. And that's because usually talking to people one-on-one can help you come to a better solution. And it just feels a lot less aggressive and weird. But most players are interested in choices because of the flavor, not usually because they want something that's OP. But one of my things was I didn't want people to be playing the same class. I knew that I had a lot of players that were kind of specialists and really wanted to shine in certain situations, and that having that overlap might kind of bring that vibe down for them a bit. So with my first session 0, I was too lenient about letting them do that. And I could tell in that moment that one player was kind of bummed out that someone picked the same class and they had that overlap. And I was able to fix this with subclasses and everything, but I should have just prevented it. And I recently read a tip that someone had posted, maybe on Twitter. I'm really sorry I didn't bookmark it or anything. I don't know who it was by. But I read that someone wrote down all of the classes on note cards before they let their players pick. Then if 2 players want the same class and can't decide between the 2 of them, you can just have them do a roll-off for it or something. And I think that's a great idea for people who don't want overlap. Yes, you might have a character that's a little bummed, so if you can do something like solve it with subclasses, go for it. But like I said, that one player was bummed. So just be aware of those type of dynamics with your players. And so pitfall number 2 is focusing on mechanics during this session. Other than choosing the class at the end after you do the story stuff, don't talk about that today. Make that a separate little mini session or a one-on-one if people need some help. But today is about focusing on story. So really making sure they're in that story-focused mindset is important. But I ended up with my first session 0. It ended up being largely mechanics-based session. And I think my pitfall was because it was a bunch of new players and they were very, very nervous about rule sets, even though I told them not to be.
I told you not to.
But because they talked so much about the mechanics and spent so much time going over classes and subclasses, I had to send them a questionnaire with a large amount of follow-up questions instead of the small amount I would have liked to. So I essentially had to sign them essays for homework, but it was just really hard to tear them away from that fear and nervousness around the learning curve of playing D&D. And because of this pitfall specifically, I think that if you have a bunch of new players, you should actually really consider running a one-shot for them. Maybe one still in line with your campaign setting, but one with pre-gen characters, a small goal to hit, just something where they can really see how these mechanics sort of work. All the better if you kind of know what classes they're interested in playing, but that way they can get a better sense of what these classes look like during play, what kind of skills usually come up, and then they can just get a better idea and feel a little bit more informed about their choices. So a separate one-shot before doing a session 0 specifically about your campaign can be a really good idea for that. But your session 0 should be story focused in order for you to get the most out of it. Pitfall number 3, being too rigid. The opposite of too much leniency also isn't great. If you truly feel like your players aren't picking up what you're putting down, this might not be the right group for this campaign. And I think you're a lot less likely to experience this sort of mismatch if you did a pre-campaign survey. Do it! Do it! Do it! And if you build out a good single-page campaign guide, both those things will really help stop the sort of miscommunication before it starts. But with major disconnects aside, if you find yourself knowing your players at every turn and correcting the stories they're coming up with, there's a good chance you might prefer to write a novel about this idea rather than use it as a campaign concept. Staying open about what the players want to do, both within the general story and the campaign world at large, it'll be a lot more fun and a lot more interesting for both parties. So if you find yourself clutching on to that baby campaign idea that tightly, consider starting this process from the top with a different group or re-examining whether it should be a campaign concept for you at all. So if you haven't yet, give the No Play Session 0 a shot. Tell me how it goes. Or if you already run yours in a similar way, tell me about what kind of cool, unexpected ideas became part of your campaign that you wouldn't have expected as a result of having this type of Session 0. Next week, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about how I write out my single-page campaign guides and how I build out a portal for my players before we have these Session 0s. And then after that, I think we're going to be talking about how to kind of build your campaign story around your players and their ideas. That way you build something that they actually care about. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss those.